You guys can see this or not, but usually there's like a dome light right here. But they took the dome light off and used it to power the tracker that's in this truck. This truck is low jacked, and so it's got a little tracker, but it uses this power to do that. Now, what's also interesting then, so I had to come up with lights. Oh, looks like I need to fix that too. But anyway, so I wanted light in my truck, but I wanted to be able to point it and be useful for something. So I bought two little spotlights that you can use for, I guess they're for off-roading and things like that, and attach them to my ceiling so that I could take and essentially move them around, shift them around, do whatever I want so that I could point the light wherever I wanted, and I made a switch down below my steering wheel for it. And I've kind of liked it. I wish I would have actually taken the time and maybe put a little hole in the cardboard and then put the wires up and through instead of how I have it. But I have been very grateful at how the lighting and everything has been. Let me, real quick here, check my phone, make sure that I don't have an emergency phone call here. And we will be reading today Jim Butcher's Small Favor. We are right now on chapter 10 of the 10th book of the Dresden Files. So let me go ahead and I'll get started. And whilst I'm reading this, if you guys would like, share, and subscribe, and grab your copy of the book as well, that would be wonderful. I finished the spell that I thought would keep the Gruffs busy and climbed wearily out of my lab to find Thomas sitting by the fireplace. My big gray dog, Mouse, lay beside him, his fur reflecting highlights of reddened silver in the firelight, watching Thomas's work with interest. My brother sat cross-legged on the floor, with my gun laying disassembled on a soft leather cloth upon the hearth. He frowned in concentration as he cleaned the pieces of the weapon with a brush, a soft cloth, and a small bottle of oil. Mister, my hyperthyroid tomcat, bounded over the minute I opened the trap door to the lab and hurried down the folding staircase into the sub-basement. "Go get 'em, Tiger," I muttered after him by way of encouragement, making them run their little hooves off. I left the door open, heaved myself to the couch, and collapsed. Mouse's tail thumped the floor gently. "You all right?" Thomas asked. "Tired," I said. "Big spell." "Uh-huh," he said, working industrially on the weapons barrel. "What building did you burn down?" "Your apartment. If you don't lay off the wise-ass commentary," I said. "Give me a minute, and we'll get moving." Thomas gave me a sidelong, calculating look. I needed another minute or two anyway. "When's the last time you cleaned that thing?" Who's the president now?" Thomas clucked his teeth in disapproval and returned to the gun. "Let me know when you're ready." "Just give me a minute to catch my breath," I said. When I woke up, there was dim light coming from my mostly buried basement windows, and my neck felt like the bones had been welded together by a badly trained contractor. The various beatings I'd received the night before had formed a corporation and were attempting a hostile takeover of my nervous system. I groaned and looked around. Thomas was sitting with his back against the wall, beside the fireplace, as relaxed and patient as any tiger. His gun, mine, and the bent-bladed currichy knife he'd favored lately lay close at hand. Down in my lab, something clattered to the floor, and from one of the shelves or tables I heard Mister's paw scampered over the metal surface of the center table. "What are you grinning at?" my brother asked. "Mister," I said. "He's been knocking around down there all morning," Thomas said. "I was going to go round him up before he broke something, but the skull told me to leave him alone." "Yeah," I said. I creaked to my feet and shuffled to my little alcove with delusions of kitchenhood. I got out the bottle of aspirin and downed them with a glass of water. "For your own safety. Mister gets upset when someone gets between him and his packet of catnip." I shuffled over to the lab and peered down. Sure enough, the little cloth bag containing catnip and the silver oak leaf pin still hung from the extra large rubber band I'd snipped and fixed to the ceiling directly over Little Chicago. As I watched, Mister hopped up onto a work table, then bounded into the air to bat at the cloth bag. He dragged it down to the table with him, claws hooked in the fabric, and landed on the model of Lincoln Park. My cat rubbed his face ecstatically against the bag for a moment, then released it and batted playfully at it as the rubber band sent it rebounding back and forth near him. Then he seemed to realize he was being watched. He turned his face up to me, meowed smugly, flicked the snub of his tail jauntily, and hopped to the floor. "Bob," I called, "is the spell still working?" "Aye, Captain," Bob said. "Arr!" "What's with that?" Thomas murmured from right beside me. I twitched hard enough to take me up off the floor, and I glared at him. "Would you stop doing that?" He nodded, his expression serious, but I could see the corner of his right mouth quivering with the effort not to smile. "Right. Forgot." I growled and called him something unkind, yet accurate. He wouldn't stop begging me to take him to see that pirate movie, so I took him with me the last time I went to the drive-in down in Aurora, and he got into it. He's been dying down. But if he calls me matey one more time, I'm going to snap. "That's interesting," Thomas said, "but that's not what I was talking about." "Oh, right," I said. I pointed at the catnip bag. "The leaf's in there." "Isn't that just going to draw summer goons here?" I let out a nasty laugh. "No, they can't see it through the wards around the lab." "Then why the big rubber band?" I linked Summer's beacon spell to the matrix around Little Chicago. Every time the leaf gets within a foot of the model, my spell transfers the beacon signal to the corresponding location in the city. Thomas's eyes narrowed in thought, and then he suddenly grinned in understanding as Mister pounced on the catnip again, this time landing near the Field Museum. "If they're following that beacon, they'll be running all over town." "In 2.5 feet of snow," I confirmed, grinning. "You're sadistic." "Thank you," I said solemnly. "Won't they figure it out?" "Sooner or later," I admitted. "But it should buy us a little time to work with. Excuse me." I shambled to the door and put on my coat. "Where to first?" Thomas asked. "Nowhere just yet. Sit tight." I grabbed my square-headed snow shovel from the popcorn tin by the door, where it usually resided, with my staff, sword cane, and the epically static magic sword Fidelicius. Mouse followed me out. It was a job of work to get the door open, and more than a little snow spilled over the threshold. I started with shoveling the stairs and worked my way up, a gravedigger in reverse. Once that was done, I shoveled the little sidewalk, the front porch of the boarding house, and the exterior stairs running up to the Willoughby's apartment on the second floor. Then I dug a path to the rest of the mailboxes by the curb. It took me less time than I thought it would. There was a lot of snow, but it hadn't formed any layers of ice, and it was basically a question of tossing powder out of the way. Mouse kept watch, and I tried not to throw snow in his face. We returned to my apartment, and I slung the snow handles back down into the popcorn tin. Thomas frowned at me. "You had to shovel the walk?" "Harry, Somehow I'm under the impression that you aren't feeling the urgency here. In the first place, I said, I'm not terribly well motivated to bend over backward to save John Marcone's Armani-clad ass. I couldn't lose much sleep over him. In the second place, my neighbors are elderly, and if someone doesn't clean up the sidewalks, they'll be stuck here. In the third place, I've got to do whatever I can to make sure I'm on my landlady's good side. Miss Swunkerchief is almost deaf, but it's sort of hard to hide it when assassin demons or gangs of zombies kick down the door. She's willing to forgive me the occasional wild party because I do things like shovel the walk. It's easier to replace apartment than your ass, Thomas said. I shrugged. I was so stiff and sore from yesterday that I had to do something to get my muscles loosened. Up and moving. The time was going to be gone either way. Might as well take care of my neighbors. I grimaced. Besides, you feel bad that your landlady's buildings sometimes get busted up because you live in it? Thomas said. He took his head and snorted. Typical. Well, yeah, but that's not it. He frowned at me, listening. I struggled to find the right words. There are a lot of things I can't control. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few days. I don't know what I'm going to face, what kind of choices I'm going to have to make. I can't predict it. I can't control it. It's too big. I nodded at my shovel, but that I can predict. I know that if I pick up that shovel and clear the snow from the walkways, it's going to make my neighbors safer and happier. I glanced at him and shrugged. It's worthwhile to me. Give me a minute to shower. He regarded me for a second and then nodded. Oh, he said, with the tiniest of smiles. He mimed a sniff and a faint grimace. I'll wait gladly. I cleaned up. We were on the way out the door when the phone rang. Harry, Murph said, what the hell is going on out there? Why? I asked. What the hell is going on out there? We've had at least 24, well, I suppose the correct term is sightings. Everything from Bigfoot to mysterious balls of light. Naturally, it's all getting shunted to SI. I started to answer her, then paused. Marcone and the outfit were involved. While they didn't have anywhere near the influence in civic affairs that they might have wanted, Marcone had always had sources of information inside the police department. Sources his subordinates could, presumably, access as well. It would be best to exercise some caution. You calling from the station? I asked her. Yeah. We should talk, I said. Murphy might not want to admit that anyone she worked with could be providing information to the outfit, but she wasn't the sort to stop believing the truth just because she didn't like it. I see, she said. Where? McNally's, I said. I checked the clock. 3 hours? See you there. I hung up and started for the door again. Mouse followed close at my heels, but I turned and nudged him gently back with my leg. Not this time, boy, I told him. The bad guys have a lot of manpower, access to skilled magic, and I need a safe place to come home to. If you're here, there's no way anyone is going to sneak in and leave me a present that goes boom. Mouse huffed out a breath in a sigh, but sat down. Keep an eye on Mister, all right. If he starts getting sick, take the catnip away. My dog gave the door to the lab a dubious glance. Oh, give me a break, I said. You're 7 times as big as he is. Mouse looked none too confident. Thomas blinked at me and then at the dog. Can he understand you? When it suits him, I grumbled. He's smarter than a lot of people I know. Thomas took a moment to absorb that, and then faced Mouse a little uncertainly. Okay, look. What I said about Harry early, I wasn't serious, okay? It was totally a joke. Mouse flicked his ears and turned his nose away from Thomas with great nobility. What? I asked, looking between them. What did you say? I'll warm up the car, Thomas said, and retreated to the frozen gray outdoors. This is my home, I complained to no one in particular. Why do people keep making jokes at my expense in my own freaking home? Mouse declined to comment. I locked up behind me, magically and materially, and scaled Mount Hummer to sit in the passenger seat. The morning was cold and getting colder, especially since I was fresh from the shower. But the seat was rather pleasantly warm. There was no way I'd admit to Thomas that the luxury feature was superior to armored glass, but gosh, it was cozy. Right, Thomas said. Where are we headed? To where they treat me like royalty, I said. We're going to Burger King? I rubbed at the heel of my hand against my forehead and spelled Fraticade in a subvocal matter. But I had to spell out temporarily insanity and justifiable homicide, too, before I calmed down enough to speak politely. Just take a left and drive, please? Well, Thomas said, grinning, since you said please. Thank you for listening to Chapter 10 of the Dresden Files. We're moving right along here. I do want to thank you guys for joining me in this wonderful endeavor. And you guys have a wonderful, wonderful night, day, evening, afternoon, whatever time it is. Just make sure to have a wonderfully blessed day.